something that always confused me as a kid was that, being a first-timer to this movie and having seen all the movies beforehand, when Vesper first shows up, what does she say?
I'm the money?
I'm the money.
Every penny of it.
And then he says, "You're every penny of it."
Every penny of it. And I
Yeah,
remember being
Money
like,
penny?
Money penny. Like, as a kid, I was like, money penny? Is this money penny? And being very confused that it wasn't. But obviously they wrote that in there knowing what people would think.
They probably did it as a reference.
I haven't thought of that until just now.
Yeah.
So no one's thinking about that. Except you weirdos.
Yeah.
That kind of leads into something that I am a little bit confused about, and it's not like this movie is the only one guilty of this. I've been confused by aspects of most, if not all, of these movies.
Yeah.
But I do have some confusion in regards to Mr. White, Lashif, and Eva Green being like a double agent, and Mathis and calling him into question. I don't understand it 100%, and I'll admit that.
So the Mathis stuff gets answered in the next movie. Just take the Mathis stuff, put it off to the side.
So, like, if we take the organization, right, you got White controlling Lashif, and Lashif's getting money from whoever to, just make more money for Mr. White?
Think of Lashif's character like in The Dark Knight, Mr. Yao, who takes all the mobsters' money.
I'm good with calculation.
Much like in The Big Short, Christian Bale's character in that movie, he's in managing the funds that he's getting from his clients.
Mr. White will have told you that I have provided reliable banking services for many other freedom fighters over the years.
Okay. And all of his clients are all terrorists.
Has he been playing the stock market with his clients' funds? I'm not going to be too happy when they find out it's gone.
So he's basically gambling their money to make more money for himself, for whatever.
That's what I'm wondering. Like, is he doing it for them or for himself?
Both, but mostly for himself.
He's basically investment broker, right? They would invest
Hedge
their
fund
money.
Manager,
They're investing.
So he messes up. He loses
They take their
everyone's
portfolios,
money.
invest their money so they would make more money, but he's kind of doing it in a shady way and by using it to fund terrorism things that will
At Mr. White's
his amount of money.
orders?
That's not the movie. The movie is the casino story and the Vesper story. The movie's not necessarily the Mr. White stuff. We just know that this guy's a bad guy.
Is it a separate organization that's controlling Vesper Lynn and her boyfriend in blackmailing her into this whole situation of giving a different account number?
The organization behind Lashif, which is Mr. White's mysterious organization, which we all know is Spectre, is basically doing with Lashif the same thing they did with Osato back in You Only Live Twice.
Osato and number 11, report now.
We don't know for sure, but you can assume that he doesn't even have a number. He's just working for Spectre as someone who can make them a ton of money.
How do I trust this man that I've never met with my money?
You ask for the introduction. That's all my organization will guarantee.
Once they found out that it was going to be Vesper, who was the Treasury representative, they immediately got to work in kidnapping somebody close to her so that they could control her.
So that happens after she's selected to be involved.
That's to be assumed.
Yeah.
Oh.
The confusion is this, okay? So the whole thing is Lashif lying when he says,
I'm afraid your friend Mathis is really my friend Mathis.
Why would he say that if Mathis is indeed innocent, right? They leave it a bit open-ended because M says later, okay, now Mathis is cleared. And Bond's like, no.
We just proved that she's guilty, not that he's innocent.
Bond is like, Vesper is innocent because she's so hot, right? Bond's got that attribute back where he's blinded by Vagine. He's like, of the two people who are on my side, it would clearly be Mathis and it wouldn't be this hot babe that I'm in love with, right? Because he's committing the first sin of Bond, which is letting his emotions dictate his actions.
Anything else you remember?
As well as who he decides to trust, which in this movie is hoes before bros.
Anything that can help us?
Help us?
Mm-hmm.
Or help you?
The confusion, though, is the understanding that Vesper and Lashif staged the kidnapping so that Bond would make Chase. Did they stage that kidnapping? Like where she gets shoved into a car and she's like, ah.
Mathis needs me.
Mathis.
This is another one of those convenient movie shortcuts because what if Bond had just continued to sit and enjoy his champagne and caviar? What if he didn't suspect Mathis on cue and ran out the door in order to witness the kidnapping? You can assume that he'd probably get a message from Lashif later on saying, "I have the girl, I'll trade you for the money." But instead, Bond runs after her and sees the kidnapping because it's more exciting that way. At that point, you might as well ask, how is it that Felix dropped the ball so hard by not grabbing up Lashif after the game? The more interesting questions surround Mr. White's role. My assumption is that Mr. White planned this whole thing as a contingency in case Lashif lost the game. In fact, Lashif may have never known that Vesper was secretly working against Bond. Perhaps the whole time she was relaying information through Mr. White, who, knowing that Bond would probably never give up the password willingly,
No matter what you do, I'm not going to give you the password, which means your clients are going to hunt you down and cut you into little pieces of meat while you're still breathing.
had his sexy heartache of an ace in the hole Vesper ready to go. In fact, one can assume that Mr. White would probably have disapproved of putting Vesper in the middle of the road for Bond to flatten because he needed her ultimately to retrieve the password. Furthermore, why else would Vesper have Mr. White's phone number saved in her phone? And then they blame it on Mathis to sow seeds of confusion within Bond's side of things. Point the blame at Mathis so that Bond never suspects Vesper. All Mr. White had to do was wait for Lashif to execute the kidnapping, and the show begins. Lashif plants the perfect lie about Mathis. Mr. White kills Lashif in front of Bond, which not only prevents Lashif from talking to the CIA, but puts on a performance for Bond, making him think the show is over and he's safe. Hence the line,
Money isn't as valuable to our organization as knowing who to trust.
but clearly the money means a great deal to them because they never stop seeking it until they get it. This is the answer to Mathis's question.
What?
Why they left the two of you alive?
They get Bond to point the finger at Mathis, taking suspicion away from Vesper so she can secure the money. It's perfect because usually Bond is exercising Bond love, right? Where it's temporary. Bond's like telling a chick he loves her to get something from her. But on this initial Bond adventure, it's Vesper pushing the Bond love where it's real but temporary, right? She does, in a way, love Bond, but she is throwing him under the bus.
Exactly what my boyfriend was saying the other day.
Cute.
It's only a few streets away. I'm moving in with my boyfriend, Ian.
If you could hand this one to my boyfriend.
You.
She had a boyfriend.
You.
Job's done. The bitch is dead.
James, did you ever ask yourself why you weren't killed that night?
Isn't it obvious? She made a deal to spare your life in exchange for the money. I'm sure she hoped they would let her live.
But she must have known she was going to her death.
This effectively makes Vesper the most complex Bond girl we've ever had, as she's everything that Tanya wishes she was, with the falling in love with Bond under orders, but then things get real. Everything Tracy wishes she was, as the damaged feminist who pushes Bond away with all her might, but relents to his dominance, and is ultimately the complete 180-degree mirror image of the embarrassingly empty Jinx Johnson by achieving a completely three-dimensional character that even justifies her Bond girl beauty as simply a function of fitting the part of Bond's cover identity, instead of her being hot just for the sake of being hot because this is a Bond movie. It is not difficult to say that Vesper Lynd is the greatest Bond girl of all time. And most importantly, she teaches Bond the lesson that he'll take with him through all of his adventures. Trust no one and don't catch feelings, no matter what.